I have been taking care of my brother's son for 3 months when it was only supposed to be for a few weeks, and now I'm caught in a family crisis that's honestly giving me gray hairs. Not that I needed more of those. So about 3 months ago, my brother Dylan called me in a panic. His son Owen had a serious outburst at home where he told his step-siblings that he hated them and wished they would die. Pretty harsh stuff coming from a 13-year-old. Dylan and his wife Melissa were understandably freaked out, and they asked if Owen could stay with me temporarily while he attended therapy in my town. The whole arrangement was supposed to be a brief cooling-off period for everyone, just a few weeks max. I agreed because, well, family helps family, right? Plus, I kind of owed Dylan. 5 years ago, when my ex-husband cleaned out our accounts and left me jobless and homeless, Dylan financially supported me until I got back on my feet. So, when he asked for this favor, I couldn't really say no, even though my living situation isn't ideal for housing a troubled teen. See, I live with my dad who has early-stage dementia. He has good days and bad days, but he generally needs someone keeping an eye on him. Taking in an emotionally volatile teenager wasn't exactly what the doctor ordered for a peaceful household, but I figured we could manage for a few weeks. Well, those few weeks have turned into 3 months now. Dylan visits once a week to take Owen to therapy, but I've noticed he's getting increasingly frustrated with the whole situation. The slow progress seems to be really getting to him. Yesterday, after Dylan's latest therapy visit with Owen, we sat at my kitchen table while Owen was upstairs doing homework. I could tell something was up because Dylan kept checking his watch and sighing dramatically every few minutes. The therapist says Owen needs another 3 months of treatment before we should try reintegrating him back home, Dylan finally said. I watched him grip his coffee mug. He went on about how he's paying hundreds for therapy that isn't fixing anything, and how the whole situation is dragging on forever. The way he was talking about Owen's mental health was honestly making my blood boil. Trying to stay calm as I type this, I tried to gently suggest that blending families takes time, and that Owen was still processing the loss of being his dad's primary focus. That's when Dylan slammed his hand on the table. It's been 18 months since Melissa and I got married. He should be over it by now. Melissa tries so hard with him. She includes him in everything. I pointed out that since Owen's been staying with me, he's actually shown real improvement. His grades are up. He's made a friend in the neighborhood, and he hasn't had any violent outbursts. But he probably needs more time before returning to the situation that triggered him in the first place. Dylan didn't like that response one bit. He accused me of not following the therapist's recommendations properly and suggested I was somehow enabling Owen's bad attitude toward his stepfamily. When I reminded him that he chose the therapist and that I was doing him a favor by housing his son while working full-time and caring for our father, his expression darkened. Never a good sign. "You've always had a problem with Melissa," he muttered before grabbing his jacket and heading for the door. "I'll be back next week. Try to actually work on his attitude before then." After he left, I went upstairs to check on Owen and found him sitting on the stairs. From the look on his face, I could tell he'd heard enough to know his dad was frustrated with his progress and didn't really want him home. Seriously, I'm tearing up just thinking about it again. That night, I lay awake until about 3 a.m., wondering if I'm wrong for standing my ground while trying to support both my nephew and brother through this family crisis. The thing is, I've become increasingly attached to Owen over these months. He's actually a sweet kid when he feels safe and heard. He helps with my dad without being asked, does his homework without prompting, and has started opening up about his feelings in a way that shows real emotional growth. I've noticed Owen seems to be thriving in my more stable environment. My routine is predictable. I make time to listen to him, and there's no competition for attention, except maybe from my dad on his confused days. It makes me seriously question what will happen when he eventually returns to his father's home, where he clearly feels replaced and unwanted. The most heartbreaking part was last week, when Owen asked if he could call me instead of his dad when he won a math competition at school. "Dad will be too busy with the little kids," he said. "I'm not crying, you're crying." I've tried talking to Dylan about how Owen feels, but he just gets defensive and says Owen is manipulating me. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm being played by a teenager. But my gut tells me this kid is genuinely hurting and just needs someone in his corner. Owen's therapist has actually told me privately that she's concerned about sending him back too soon. She says his progress could backslide if he's reintroduced to the blended family environment before everyone's ready. I mentioned this to Dylan, but he accused me of conspiring with the therapist against him. Meanwhile, my dad's getting more confused with all the tension in the house. Yesterday, he asked me 3 times who the boy was and why he was living with us. Each time I explained, he'd nod, only to ask again an hour later. Owen was so patient with him, gently reminding my dad who he was without getting frustrated. Seriously, this kid has more emotional maturity than most adults I know. I feel overwhelmed. I want to support my brother, but I also want what's best for Owen. I want to properly care for my dad, but I also need to maintain my own sanity and keep my job, which has been super understanding so far, but that patience won't last forever. Last night, Owen asked me what would happen if his dad decided he had to go home before he was ready. The look of fear in his eyes made me feel deeply worried. I told him I'd make sure the transition was handled properly, but honestly, I don't know what rights I have here as just his temporary guardian. If anyone has experience with this kind of situation, I could really use some advice. I've tried talking to people close to me, but they're all taking sides about whether I should push back against Dylan or respect his parental authority, and it's making everything worse. Now for the first update. Wow, I honestly didn't think my post about my nephew situation would blow up like this. Rip my inbox, seriously. Thank you all for the support and advice. I've been reading everything even though I haven't had time to respond to everyone. It's been 2 weeks since that tense conversation with Dylan, and things have gotten even more complicated. For those asking about visitation, there were so many questions about this. Dylan has canceled his weekly visits with Owen both times, claiming work emergencies. I'm not entirely convinced these emergencies are real, but it's not like I can prove anything. And yes, I've been documenting everything in a journal, like many of you suggested. Owen has been doing remarkably well despite his dad's absence. He's been helping with my dad without me asking, keeping his room clean, and took it upon himself to organize our pantry yesterday, which, honestly, needed to happen. His school counselor called to tell me his teachers have noticed a positive change in his classroom participation too. Owen is very different from the angry teen who arrived 3 months ago. To answer the top questions from my last post. 1. Yes, Owen is still in therapy. 2. No, I don't have formal guardianship papers. 3. Owen's mom has not been involved since he was 5. She lives in Australia and rarely makes contact. Yesterday, everything blew up when Dylan called. He said he'd found a new therapist closer to his home and wanted Owen back immediately. Not next week, not after a transition period. Immediately. This directly contradicted what Owen's current therapist has been recommending. I suggested following the original therapist's transition plan, starting with weekend visits at Dylan's house before moving to full-time. Dylan wasn't having it. He kept saying Owen needed to adjust to being back home immediately. When I mentioned stability being important, as many of you pointed out in your comments, he accused me of overstepping. After the call, I sat with Owen at dinner and carefully explained that his dad wanted him to return home next week. I was trying to stay neutral, but I noticed how he reacted. He just stared at his plate for a long time. "I don't want to go back yet," he finally whispered. I still get angry when I think about how the little kids get all of Dad's attention. When I asked what might help him feel comfortable returning home, Owen revealed something that made my stomach drop. Apparently, before the incident where he told his step-siblings he hated them, he had overheard Melissa telling Dylan that Owen was too much work compared to her easy children. He said hearing that was what really set him off, not the fight with the step-siblings that everyone focused on. Side note, several commenters accurately guessed there was more to the original outburst story. You guys were spot on. While we were talking, Dylan called again to discuss transportation arrangements for bringing Owen home. I stepped into the kitchen to take it, explained Owen's concerns, and things worsened quickly. Dylan immediately dismissed what Owen had told me, claiming he must have misheard or misunderstood, and that Melissa would never say something like that. I still remember his exact words. "This is exactly why he needs to come home immediately. You're letting him create these narratives about Melissa that aren't true." I tried explaining that Owen seemed genuinely hurt by what he'd overheard and suggested maybe they should try family therapy before reintegration. I mentioned how much progress Owen had made in a stable environment as his therapist has repeatedly pointed out. That's when Dylan lost it. "You're trying to turn my son against my wife. You've always had issues with Melissa, and now you're using Owen." His voice kept getting louder until he was shouting. Then came the threat. He said he'd simply drive over and take Owen back if I didn't cooperate, and accused me of overstepping from temporary caregiver to replacement mother. After ending that call, I turned around to find my dad standing in the hallway looking confused by all the shouting. When I went to check on Owen, his bedroom door was locked. He'd obviously overheard enough of the conversation to be upset. That evening, my phone started blowing up with text messages from Melissa. According to her, I'm deliberately sabotaging their blended family and poisoning Owen against them. She wrote that I've always been jealous of her relationship with Dylan, which is honestly laughable. He's my brother, and that I'm using this situation to create division between them. The texts got increasingly hostile to the point where I just stopped reading them. Later that night, I checked on Owen before bed and found him on his school tablet. I was deeply affected when I saw what he was researching: rights of children in custody situations, and can kids choose which parent to live with. He quickly closed the tabs when he noticed me, but the damage was done. This 13-year-old is so desperate to stay in a stable environment that he's researching legal options. I sat with him and told him I'd do everything I could to make sure the transition happened in a way that was best for him. I didn't make promises I can't keep, as many of you warned against in your comments, but I wanted him to know someone was supporting him. This morning, I called Owen's therapist to fill her in on the situation. She seemed concerned about Dylan's push for immediate reintegration and offered to speak with him directly. She also suggested I might want to consult with a family lawyer about my position as Owen's temporary guardian, especially since Dylan seems ready to take drastic action regardless of Owen's progress or wishes. I'm now realizing I may need legal advice. Any family lawyers reading this, your input would be greatly appreciated. I have no idea what rights I have in this situation without formal guardianship papers. All I know is that Owen is thriving here, and I'm genuinely worried about what will happen if he's forced to return to his dad's house against the therapist's recommendations. The worst part is that I still care about my brother and want to support him, but I can't ignore what seems best for Owen. I keep asking myself if I'm overstepping, but then I see Owen's face light up when he feels safe, and I know I need to at least try to advocate for him. Thanks for letting me vent again, Reddit. This situation is getting more complicated by the day, and your support means more than you know. I'll update again when I figure out what my options are legally and after I've spoken with Owen's therapist about next steps. Now for the second update. Update 2. It's been a week since my last post about the ongoing saga with my nephew Owen and my brother Dylan. Thanks for all the support and awards, guys. That was unexpected. I'm typing this up at 2 a.m. because honestly, I can't sleep after everything that happened today. So after Dylan's threat to immediately reclaim Owen, I decided to consult a family lawyer, thanks to everyone who recommended this in my last post. The consultation wasn't cheap, but it was worth it for the clarity. Unfortunately, the news wasn't great. Without formal guardianship papers, I have very few legal rights in this situation. The lawyer basically told me that since Dylan never signed anything official and Owen is here on what amounts to a verbal agreement, Dylan could technically show up anytime and take him. Not what I wanted to hear. Owen's therapist has been amazing through all of this. She provided a written recommendation stating that Owen's return to his father's home should be gradual and include family therapy sessions. I forwarded this to Dylan immediately, hoping the professional opinion would carry some weight. He read it. The text showed read, but never replied. My dad's dementia symptoms have gotten worse with all the tension in the house. He's been more confused lately, asking the same questions repeatedly and sometimes not recognizing Owen in the mornings. I'm trying to maintain his routine as much as possible, but it's obvious that the stress is affecting him too. This morning, he tried to make breakfast at 4 a.m. and nearly started a fire. I'm exhausted trying to balance everything. Yesterday was rough. Owen had his first video call with his step-siblings, supervised by Melissa. I thought it might be a positive step forward, but it quickly went south. Melissa kept prompting the kids to ask Owen when he was coming home to be a proper big brother. The youngest one asked if Owen was still mad and scary, which made Owen visibly uncomfortable. By the end of the 15-minute call, Owen was in tears. He locked himself in his room for hours afterward. I didn't think things could get more intense, but I was wrong. This morning, Saturday, I was making pancakes with Owen and my dad when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Dylan standing there with Melissa. No call ahead, no warning. "We've come to take Owen home today," Dylan announced. I stood firmly in the doorway, blocking their entry. "Dylan, we need to follow the therapist's plan. You can't just show up and expect to take him. The recommendation was for gradual reintegration and family therapy first." Melissa pushed forward. "I know what's best as a mother. You have no idea what it's like to raise children." The classic, "you're not a parent, so your opinion doesn't matter" card. Classy, Melissa. The situation escalated quickly. My dad appeared behind me, confused about who was at the door and why there was yelling. Dylan used this distraction to push past me into the house. He started calling for Owen. Owen came out of his room, but stopped halfway down the stairs. Dylan demanded he pack his things immediately, but Owen wouldn't come down further. I positioned myself between Dylan and the stairs. "Think about what you're doing. Forcing him to leave could trigger another emotional outburst. Why won't you just consider the therapist's approach? What's the rush?" That's when Dylan finally broke. Suddenly, he was telling the truth for maybe the first time in months. Turns out, Melissa's children have become afraid of Owen after the incident. Melissa has been threatening to leave with her kids if Dylan doesn't resolve the situation immediately. There's the real motivation. The argument reached a breaking point when Melissa started in with, "You've always disliked me. You're using Owen as a pawn to break up our marriage." From the stairs, Owen shouted, "I heard you. I heard you telling Dad you wished I would just go live with my mother." Context: Owen's mom abandoned the family when he was 5 and moved to Australia. She's basically been out of the picture since. The room went silent. Even Dylan looked shocked. After a standoff where nobody seemed to know what to say next, Dylan and Melissa left without Owen. Dylan's parting shot was that he'd be back with proper authorities if necessary. Not sure what authorities he thinks will override a therapist's recommendation, but okay. After they left, my dad became increasingly agitated. He kept asking who those angry people were and why they wanted to take Owen away. It took over an hour to calm him down, and he still brought it up several times throughout the day. Owen was quiet, but I could tell he was processing. He helped me cook dinner and stayed close to me all evening. Later that night, I received a long email from Dylan. The truth finally came out in writing. Melissa has given him an ultimatum. Either Owen returns home and behaves perfectly, whatever that means, or she will leave with her children. Dylan wrote that he's stuck between an impossible choice and doesn't know what to do. Translation: he wants me to make it easier by just sending Owen back so he doesn't have to choose. Edit: a lot of you asked about Owen's biological mom and if she could help. I reached out to her yesterday via email, the only contact info I have. She responded pretty quickly, but made it clear she's not in a position to take Owen. She has a new family in Australia and said it would be disruptive to bring Owen into their lives now. She offered to talk to him on the phone sometime, but that's about it. Owen doesn't know. I contacted her, and I'm not planning to tell him about this rejection unless absolutely necessary. I stayed up late researching temporary guardianship options. From what I can gather, I might be able to file for emergency temporary guardianship based on Owen's emotional welfare, especially with the therapist's recommendation backing me up. But I'm torn. Am I doing the right thing by standing between a father and son? Even though I believe I'm protecting Owen's mental health, this is still my brother we're talking about. Looking at Owen sleeping on the air mattress in my spare room, I'm more convinced than ever that he needs stability right now. But I'm worried about escalating this into a legal battle with my own brother. Dylan's not a bad father. He's just caught between his new wife and his son, making terrible choices in the process. I'm trying to focus on supporting Owen and managing my dad's care right now, but we'll update when there are significant developments. In the meantime, any advice from people who've navigated similar family custody situations would be much appreciated. Now for the final update. Final update on the Owen situation. Holy crap, it's been a wild ride. You all have been incredible with your support and advice throughout this whole mess. I genuinely couldn't have gotten through it without you. So it's been 2 weeks since that explosive confrontation at my house where Dylan and Melissa showed up demanding to take Owen home. A lot has happened since then. Understatement of the year. The day after Dylan and Melissa stormed out, I received an email from Dylan saying he was filing for emergency custody of Owen. I immediately called the lawyer I'd consulted previously, who told me to forward all the documentation I had, the therapist's recommendations, text messages, everything. Mini update before I continue. My dad's actually doing much better now that the constant tension has eased. His doctor adjusted his medication, and having a more stable routine with Owen has really helped. I spent the next 3 days gathering everything I could to present my case. Owen was a wreck too. He barely ate and kept asking if I thought his dad really hated him. Talk about heartbreaking conversations I never expected to have. Meanwhile, the lawyer was putting together an emergency response to Dylan's petition, including the therapist's written statements about Owen's progress and recommendations for gradual reintegration. The hearing was scheduled quickly. Apparently, family court moves quickly for these emergency petitions. I had to take a day off work, which my boss was surprisingly understanding about once I explained the situation. Shout out to decent human beings in management positions. Walking into that courtroom was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. Dylan and Melissa were already there, sitting with their lawyer. Melissa wouldn't even look at me, but Dylan kept shooting glances my way. The judge first reviewed all the documentation from both sides, then asked to speak with Owen privately in chambers. Apparently, this is standard in custody cases involving kids old enough to articulate their feelings. When Owen came out of that meeting, the judge returned, looking thoughtful, and proceeded to deliver a ruling that changed everything. Not only did she deny Dylan's emergency petition, but she granted me temporary guardianship of Owen until the end of the school year. That's 4 whole months away. The judge didn't mince words, and I'm loving her for it. She cited the therapist's professional opinion, Owen's clear statements about his home situation, and the fact that he was thriving in my care as reasons for her decision. But she also ordered mandatory family counseling sessions for all of us, including Melissa and her kids, starting immediately. After court, Dylan wouldn't even speak to me. He just stormed off with Melissa, who was tapping away on her phone. Within hours, mutual friends started sending me screenshots of Melissa's social media rants about family destroyers and manipulative children stealing fathers away. Real subtle, Melissa. She never names names, but anyone who knows our situation can figure it out. The judge specifically warned against disparaging anyone involved in the case, but I guess Melissa thinks she's above that. For the next 2 weeks, things were relatively quiet. Owen relaxed more each day the longer he stayed with me, knowing he had at least 4 months of stability. He even joined the school science club and is working on some project involving robotics. Never seen the kid so excited. My dad has been doing better with his dementia too. The more consistent routine seems to help him. Yesterday was our first court-mandated family therapy session. Dylan almost didn't show up. My brother actually texted me 30 minutes before saying something came up at work. I forwarded that to his lawyer, who must have put the fear of God into him because he appeared 10 minutes late. The therapist's office, as we all sat there, me next to Owen on one couch, Dylan and Melissa as far from us as possible on another, with her 2 kids next to her. Those kids kept whispering and pointing at Owen, clearly having been told God knows what about him. Owen just stared at his shoes the whole time. The therapist started by acknowledging how difficult the situation was for everyone and asked each person to express one hope they had for the family. When it was the youngest stepsister's turn, she's only 6, she said she was scared of Owen but missed how he used to read her stories before he got mad all the time. When it was Melissa's turn, she launched into this speech about how her hope was for this nightmare to end so they could be a normal family again without interference. The therapist had to redirect her 3 times to focus on constructive hopes rather than blame. Then came Owen's turn. Owen just quietly said that he felt like his dad chose a new family over him. He described how his belongings were moved to a smaller room to give his step-siblings the larger shared space, how his dad stopped attending his soccer games but never missed his stepsister's dance recitals. Owen revealed that he overheard his dad and Melissa discussing sending him to boarding school, and that was what triggered his outburst about hating his step-siblings. Melissa immediately interrupted, calling Owen a liar. That's when the therapist pulled out Owen's journal entries from months ago that documented the conversation in detail, along with dozens of other instances where he felt rejected by his father. The room went silent. The therapist turned to Dylan and asked him to respond to these specific concerns rather than just Owen's behavior. After what felt like forever, my brother broke down. He actually admitted that he'd been trying so hard to make his new marriage work that he sacrificed his relationship with Owen. He confessed he was afraid of being alone again if Melissa left him. Melissa did not take this well. When the therapist suggested that her ultimatum about Owen was emotionally abusive to both Dylan and Owen, she grabbed her purse, said something to Dylan, and stormed out, her kids following. On the drive home, Owen was quiet for a long time. Then he asked if he could start calling my place home instead of his aunt's place. I'm not going to lie. This kid just needed to feel wanted somewhere. The real surprise came last night when Dylan called me. Just me, no Melissa in the background for once. He almost apologized. Almost. He said something like, "I guess it's easier for everyone if Owen stays with you for now until we figure things out." Classic Dylan. But honestly, I'll take it. It's probably the closest to an admission of wrongdoing I'll ever get from my brother. This morning, I helped Owen register for the next semester at his school here. The look of relief on his face when I told him he'd definitely be staying through the end of the school year was worth all the drama. For now, at least, he feels safe. Edit. A lot of you asked about child support. The court actually ordered Dylan to pay a reasonable monthly amount for Owen's expenses, which he tried to argue against. Also, Melissa's social media tirades have apparently cost her some friends. Two of her closest mom friends reached out to me privately, saying they're concerned about how she's handling the situation and treating Owen. I know this saga isn't completely over, but for now, Owen is safe, my dad is stable, and I'm learning how to be a parent to a teenager overnight. Send coffee. This chapter of my life definitely wasn't in my 5-year plan, but sometimes the family you choose is just as important as the family you're born into. Thanks again to everyone who's been along for this wild ride.